Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike Young, your host, and this is the second part of our interview with David Parsons. In this episode, he chats about the rest of his time in Operation Desert Storm, what he did after his time on the Tomcat, and also his brilliant photography. Remember, you can help the channel to continue putting out regular quality content by becoming a patron via patreon.com/Aircrew Interview, where you receive 4 different tiers, each having its own benefits. So don't forget to click the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. I also want to thank our sponsor, Laco Watches, who were one of the original companies to produce pilot watches for the Luftwaffe during World War II. They produce both A and B dial watches in different sizes to suit all tastes, which adopt the look of times gone by but still satisfied modern demands. You can check out all their models and products via www.laco.d. Thank you.
I was approaching 2,000 hours in the airplane. I was very confident in the airplane. And it was like the culmination of all your training. It's not like I'm a warmonger or anything, but, I felt like, if someone's going to go, I want to go. I don't want someone else to go in my place. And I can tell you that the first day strike, I was the first Tomcat on the Cat. Standing alerts were very pleasurable. And it was just a pleasurable day. And I remember saying the Lord's Prayer. And I remember I wasn't so much worried about dying as I was, don't let me mess up. Yeah. I've talked to a lot of the guys that feel the same way. I just didn't want to let my comrades down. And so it was, but I flew in the, during the El Dorado Canyon. I'd seen AAA a lot, especially at night. Can't really see it during the day unless it's the bigger stuff that leaves a gray cloud. Yeah. So that wasn't anything new to me. There was one of the guys in the squadron that had been in the squadron with me then too, and we were the only guys that had seen AAA except for the Air Wing commander. So there was a couple of guys made themselves airsick from doing this weaving jink that we did. So to throw off the radar guy to AAA, and I flew with one of them, and I said, you're kind of overdoing it here. It's 20,000 feet. They're not. Yeah. Not going to reach us up here. It's more worried about the SAMs, but we knew how to avoid them. So it was exhilarating, and it was a real challenge. We got we've talked about the fighter missions, but there was an interesting debate that went on during Desert Shield because I had been I was the first RIO trained on the East Coast in Tarps, the tactical aerial pod system, and up to then they were training on the West Coast, and it was just coming into the forefront in 80-81, and it became arguably the first mission that Tomcats saw sustained combat with Tarps missions over Lebanon, where they had to fly because of the cameras were low to medium altitude. They had to fly at 10,000 feet over all manner of AAA and the Baca. Wow. And they were, they'd fly a section of Tomcats, and they were picking up pictures of, surface air missiles trying to get them. But the Tomcat, like Oki, there's no way I can come close to Oki describing how those engines work. But the A engine is a beast. If you get down low, and it's usually, the funny thing is most guys don't get to fight it there because our training rules say knock it off below 10,000 feet. And sometimes they'll let you fly to fight. But one of my first skippers, when we were fighting over Oman, said, you guys got to get used to the airplane down here. And we had a guy from VX4, Paul Miles, that knew all about it. And he kept talking about the effect. And so we all went down there and played with it and went, holy cow, this, it's like having a turbocharger down there. And so those Tomcats had to fly every day. They knew they were coming because they were looking for mortar sites, things like that. And so that became, and that's where we got, I know that one guy asked a question online about the AOQ 167. When we first got those, they modified the Tarps Tomcats to be able to carry an expanded chaff adapter with 4 buckets of chaff and flares in addition to the 2 that we already had. And so that gave us a lot of extra chaff. And then we had this ALQ 167, which is his very first style pod. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as the DLQ 3. And sometimes they call it the Bullwinkle. And that's this big old pod that we're worried about Syria and the SA-5, and we were worried about the SA-6. So it was tuned be able to handle either one of those threats for us, because the basic Tomcat doesn't have any capability against those. That was a big shortfall in the Tomcat. And when I first joined the community, they said we wouldn't even go over land.
Oh, wow.
That our job is fleet air defense. You have no business over land because you don't have adequate DECM. You're too big a target.
Right.
And we grew up thinking that, and then all of a sudden, here they are flying every day over Lebanon, and that changed a lot of thinking. So fast forward to Desert Shield, the first thing we had a planner come out and work with us almost every day from Riyadh, and I kept saying, "What about Tarps?" And they said, "No, we've got RF4s, all we need. We have SR2s. We've got all these assets. We don't need Tarps." And I kept saying, if you do, you need to tell us now, because you can't just stash those pods and expect them to work. Because of the film, you have to maintain the chemistry of the photo processors on the ship. It needs to be looked at all the time. And the film doesn't store well, especially in a humid environment. It wasn't that humid over there. But you got to use the cameras. You got to use the air crews. And I finally convinced the skipper to let us fly some Tarps hops while we were sitting there in Desert Shield. So we started doing some port surveillance down in Somalia. And so we were ready. And all of a sudden they showed up and said, "Holy cow, we need you guys." And one of the neat parts of it was the RF4s needed escorts. We didn't. We didn't want escorts. We escort ourselves.
Yeah.
So that got us a lot of attention, and it made the inter-service rivalry go away, because they also need a lot more gas than we did. So when I planned out a mission, the guy came to me and I said, "Well, here's what we would need." He came back and he said, "You got it. Every day we need a Tarps mission in the morning, in the afternoon, look at certain areas for Scuds."
Oh, wow.
And well, the Israelis were really, saber rattling that they were going to come into the war if we didn't do something about the Scuds. So, and we said, "Look, we're looking for him." And so that's one thing I'm not sure how much I can say, that we kind of got tipped into where they thought they were. RF4s there were three, I call them lanes, 3 different lanes, that if you took all the targets, you could do them in one big long trip, but there were 3 separate lanes. They wanted 3 different missions for each lane. And I said, "I can do it in one. I just need gas. I'll do it in one." And so I won on that too. And I figured it was going to be an hour and a half in country. It was like a busman's tour of Iraq.
Yeah.
Starting at the southwestern border, flying straight up around El Qaim, but avoiding it, and then going straight down towards Baghdad, and then coming back down. And that's when the second one I did, I was flying the last leg, and I hear the AWAC saying, "Any aircraft with unexpended ordnance, check in now." And I knew that I always listened to everybody, so I wanted to know what was going on. But I knew there were 19 A-7s flying towards a target in central Iraq. And I knew by the time they probably hadn't gotten there yet. And I had all the freaks of the squadron. And I knew who the strike lead was. So I called that squadron freak and asked for the skipper. And he came back very gruffly, "Roger." And I had, "Check in on this freak now." And he did what I said. He checked in, and they diverted all of them there were so many Iraqis on the ground trying to find the guys that were on the run, the Bravo 20. And we could see it. I mean, there was that was very unusual to see so much activity down there on the desert.
Yeah.
So I told the guy I was flying with, "Hey, let's stick around and let's photograph some of this, because, we may be able to help. Something's going on." We didn't know what, but we knew something was going on down there. And boy, it was like a field day. A-10s were showing up and going down there and strafing low. But they were taking out a lot of those guys that were trying to chase them. And then when I landed and I debriefed with the intel guy, and he goes, "Yeah, there's an SAS team. They've lost radio communications. They think they're on the run." So it wasn't until the book came out that I put 2 and 2 together.
Wow, what a story, Joe. Oh my God, that's amazing. The timing, that time fascinates me. And would you say the F-14 did very well in that operation, or that, kind of environment?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll put in the words of our A6 skipper. The first night out, he got overflown by a fox bat. And we're pretty sure, as we pieced this together over the years, that was the Foxbat that shot down the F-18.
Oh,
and he was out
right.
there trying to lock up airplanes, but the ones that had really good, the DCM was working, it would break his lock, and he would come through the formation again. But I think the story was the F-18's rearward DCM was faulty or something. But anyway, he that night afterwards, where we have something called mid-rats, where the food that they serve at midnight, basically.
Okay.
So that's usually, you don't eat breakfast because you're shift, and you usually hit lunch, dinner, and the mid-rats if you can make those if you're not flying. So mid-rats is really kind of a social thing for the aviators. We had our own wardroom up above, right below the flight deck. The ship's company stayed down below the hangar deck, so that was like ours. And so I was in the chow line, and I'm the first Tomcat guy that the skipper sees. And he's a big guy. And he just clamped his hand on my shoulder and asked me if I knew how many burner rings a Foxbat had. And I said, I don't have a clue. And he goes, well, I do. And he said, I was looking up as he overflew me. And I remember when I went through the Top Gun senior officer course in '88. Not that it matters when it was. But there was a big spirited debate in the class because it was all COXOs going to squadrons and air wing commanders. There was a couple admirals in there. And there was a big debate when they were talking about how the Tomcats would escort strikes. And the A6 guys in this class, one was a CAG, and he fought really hard saying, we don't want you near us. Your radar is going to tip them off. They'll know we're going, and if you want to do us a favor, you'll go 50 miles to the west. He was looking at this chart. You'll go 50 miles to the west and attract all the attention over there while we go in low. And so our A6 squadron and the Sarah guys were all kind of like, we don't need you around us, Tomcats. But this skipper said, I know what I said before, but I want Tomcats to the left of me. I want Tomcats to the right of me. And he says that if you don't shoot down any MiGs, that's fine with me. I just want you to keep them away. Because by then, everybody saw that wherever you pointed the OG-9 radar, it was like a flashlight in a dark room with coaches, and they just run away. I saw them on that first day. I was like, wow, we are going to get engaged. I could see so far with my radar. I saw the caps. I saw the Tomcats. We had just introduced a new piece of kit called the ASW-27 Charlie. It was a fighter-fighter data link. We always had this Link 4 Alpha that we could work with the E2 on in the ship. But what they did is they added the capability in the software that the Tomcats could see each other. So I could see where the Tomcats were. I could see what their radars were doing. I could see their fuel states. I could hook them, see their fuel states. And I said, and you could tell when they commit missiles. So it's a marvelous, marvelous boost to situational awareness. And so I was watching this all go down. I could tell where the strike was because I could see all the Tomcats. And so all of a sudden, they start moving away. Just as to the point that missiles should be in the air, they start moving away. Two of them, we were coming from, if this is a map, the Kennedy airplanes were coming like this, hitting this H2 airfield. And then the Sarah guys were down here at the airfield down this railroad road that you could see. We're down here doing this. So when these MiGs got pushed this way, two of them went down the road to escape to this airfield. Here comes the Sarah guys. And that's where those are the two guys that the Tomcats had already come through. And here's the F-18s that all of a sudden the E2, their E2, the AWACS didn't pick up on it and said, hey, on your nose. And that's when Mark Fox and Nick Mungillo, they were the wingmen. The flight lead didn't pick up on, because there's a lot of chatter on the radios.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Not picking up on, but they, as wingmen, they were like, hey, there's something up there. And they went from, it's just a perfect McDonnell Douglas, as it was called back then, ad for, hey, I was in air to ground. I push a button. Now I'm in air to air. It's not that fast for the Tomcat. I can tell you that.
Absolutely.
And post off missiles, and rest is history.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've had a very interesting time over there and on that operation. But can you briefly tell us, before we move on to the personal side for yourself, what you got up to after your Desert Shield and your F-14 career?
After Desert Storm, we came back and we originally started the cycle. Everybody went on leave for a little while, for about 6 weeks, and then we were sent to Rosie Roads to start another workup period. So I became the officer in charge of that. Had a lot of good flying down in Rosie Roads, and one day I go into I'd always go in early because I was the officer in charge, and looked at the message traffic, and there's orders on the Pentagon, and I'm like, what's this? So because I thought I'd have probably at least another 6 months. But what happened was the admiral of our battle group in the Red Sea, the guy I had done all the reconnaissance work for, got orders aviation. And it turned out he's the same guy years ago that swore me in as a Lieutenant JG. I'd worked for him before. Wow. And one of the people that knew me as a Marine. And when he left the ship, I remember the change of command, we were going through the receiving line. He says, "I'll be seeing you in Washington." And I thought he was just kidding, but I guess he wasn't. And but he sent me up there to be in charge of Navy photo reconnaissance, and which kind of made sense. And then when I finally showed up in November, I didn't have to be there till November. I walked in and they said, "Well, the admiral changed his mind." I'm like, what? And I've been doing meetings. There was a big recap on photo reconnaissance at the Defense Intelligence Agency, especially about Scud hunting. So I was participating in that, really getting to know that world, so I would be prepped for my job. And they said, "Well, no, you're now going to be in charge of air-to-air missiles." The guy in charge of those got tapped for another assignment, and he's got to go. And the admiral said, "What do we do?" And he goes, "Oh, we'll put Hajo in there." He's been in the building before, because he knew I'd been in the building as a Marine, and I'd worked in the office that we were the TAC air analysts, so he knew I knew missiles. And I don't think I knew him as well as he thought I did, but but I did. I got immersed in it, and that was a fascinating tour. Working for him, so I meant that I wrote the requirement for the AIM-9X Sidewinder, the improved AMRAAM, the Joint Helmet Mounted Queuing System. It was really, really an involved tour, and I was there 3 years, and that's when a company invited me to come work for them right at my 20-year point, and I wasn't sure about it, but the Admiral's chief of staff was an old Tomcat guy, and he goes, you're only thinking about your next tour. This is to be the rest of your life. You need to do this. This would be good for us if you did this." And so I ended up retiring in 1994, but then I went to a company where I was supposed to build a course on how the Pentagon works, which I did. But when I walked in the door, they started talking to me about Lantern. I had done all the air missile integration. I was way more familiar with the Tomcat and the Hornet than I'd ever been in a squadron, because I've been immersed in it for 3 years in all these interface control working groups. So I knew about the stuff you had to do, and we started talking about how you could do it in an ad hoc way, because I knew the budgeting process was not going to allow you to do a normal 5-year development. You had to do something quick. And the guy in the company, Jim Willison, knew that he could convince Mark Marietta to pay for all the stuff that needed to be done in the cockpit. And he knew about some boxes that had been built for air to ground originally, but they had some unused connectors behind them. So there was a lot of little miracles in getting the Lantern on there. So I got totally immersed in, I still ended up working AIM-9X. I still ended up working Lantern and building this training course. So I'm still doing stuff that are sort of the evolution of doing that.
Progressing from that, yeah. Well, you've certainly had a great career, but you were also involved in the sunset of the Tomcat in 2006. Can you tell us a bit about that?
That was a labor of love, and as we knew was approaching, we knew we wanted to do something spectacular, and I was able to, have the time to devote to that. And we went and found Bad Fred Lewis because we wanted a flag officer, but there were some other guys, Dog Doyle, who'd been original Tomcat guy, and Natalie Bell, who was, worked on the base, and just, we really got the who's who of people that knew how to get stuff done. Her husband, Taco. We had all these people that, and I put a lot of, I expended, I told somebody, every creative ounce, that I had in my body, I squeezed out to try to make that a memorable event, and plan it out so it wasn't, the wing wanted to just do a change of command type thing, be in and out in 45 minutes, done. There was a real attitude like, Tomcat, you've had your time, it's time for you to go. And we said no, and that was good because Bad Fred fought that for us. And then I just poured in the creative stuff. I wanted to have like a fighter fling thing where you had a golf tournament, and you had a run, and then we were able to we worked with Ward Carroll, who was my relief at Approach Magazine, who was working at military.com, and I asked if he would sponsor a rock group or contribute. And he had this lady with him. She goes, only if you're going to get somebody like Cheap Trick. And I said, you know what? Let me make a phone call. And it turns out Cheap Trick was willing to come.
Awesome.
Was willing to come to Morale, Welfare, and Rec. And so we got that set up for the concert. And Ward Carroll is a guitarist of some note. So we got him the backstage pass. And he's the only person that ever got to do a guest appearance with Cheap Trick. We produced posters and coins and set up a website. Thanks to Roger Kemp, who was the fence check guy. The fence check guys just turned out for us and helped us with the publications. And I really wanted to make it special. I think it was at the end, but boy, was I worn out.
I can imagine. It made it look like a busy time. So, Joe, we're going to go into a bit of a more of a personal side now. So, just some questions so our viewers can get an insight into, how you run and operate. So, Joe, do you have any hobbies?
Photography.
Photography, yes. We're going to talk about that.
And I like riding bicycles, but I like reading. I have a pretty big library. The last time I did a good in-depth count, which was 5 years ago, I had 3,000 books. So I know I've had at least 1,000 since then. I love books. I've written several, so but I just immerse myself in that.
Yeah. And yeah, obviously, I'm a massive fan of your photography. So can you tell us how you got into that and explain to our viewers how it works? And, because there's a lot of operations behind it, air to air, on the ground. So it would be great to get an insight into your workings.
Well, I like I said earlier, when I got to 102, they said, you're going to be a public affairs officer. When I figured out, here we are, a Tomcat squadron, we have a single picture. And squadrons need pictures. People write in for them. When you do awards, you have to have one for the awards binder. You want pictures on your wall. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about aerial photography, but we were a Tarps squadron. And that meant we had a Tarps warrant officer. His name's, at that time, was Joe Leo, who was a very accomplished combat photographer, as they call him. It's a special designation. They can go in with the SEALs. They are just really good photographers. And he'd come from Combat Camera and got commissioned. And this was new for him being a fighter squadron. So because I was Tarps, we became good friends, and I asked him a lot of questions. But the biggest problem back then, today, the people that grew up I had this conversation with Rich Cooper at the co-op.
Yes, Rich, yeah.
And that people that grew up in the digital age can't really relate to this, but photography, besides investing in equipment, back then you had to invest in film and process.
Yeah, of course.
And you couldn't just go anywhere. And there was there was a big photo lab on the ship, not just for all the Tarps film. Those are huge processors, the size of coffins. But they also had the photo lab could do handheld, but it turned out that the ship had these little VIP books that they would give to visitors, and they wanted pictures of the airplanes, and they had to be current. So I kind of fell back into that. They wanted to know if we had any pictures, and I had this hand-me-down camera from my dad. It was a Pentax K1000, I believe, and so I didn't know what to do with aperture, shutter speed, any of that stuff. I knew how to do the ASA setting, but Joe taught me, and he taught me, flight by flight, gave me some film to play with, and he'd go down to the ship's photo lab and talk to the photo officer, but what happened is slowly but surely, I can remember him going through picture by picture, telling me, why don't you try this, Dave? And, I learned to compensate for all the light, and then the vibration in the airplane. The Tomcat vibrates like crazy because of the environmental control system is blowing like a hurricane. You can't even stand to have the helmet off without earplugs. It's so loud. And the only thing louder is a Bear engine, the Bear
I've heard about that, yes.
Yeah. So you normally would take a picture and put your elbow up on the rail, but that's where the tube was that blew all this air. So talking to him, and I started talking to some magazine editors, Bob Lawson in particular out at Hook, and he talked about the vibration. So I learned that I could compensate by driving my shutter speed way up there, 2,000 if I could get it, or 2,000. We just call it 2,000, or 1,000. So and every time I did one of these things, I'd get my pictures would go up a little better, and and then I realized there's a lot of glare in the canopy. So then I was taking some good pictures, and it was slow but sure. But I tell you, my later days, I was a lot more productive than I was in the early days, because sometimes it was so frustrating because you'd fly 2 hours and not have a single opportunity to take a picture. One by one, surely, sooner or later, I finally, got some decent pictures, and that's what got me the notice of approach. And then I learned how to get photos published, which was a big step forward by working with the still photo branch and editors directly, that my probability of getting published was higher than most people because I knew how to work with them. And I knew what they were looking for, shooting verticals. And I talked to them before something, and I know they were looking for something in particular. And so I've amassed at least a dozen magazine covers. And then, so when I got to Desert Storm, I was ready to go. I had a good relationship. I was coming off being a magazine editor. In fact, the photo officer didn't know how to get the pictures off the ship. He said, I don't have enough material. And I said, well, so I contacted Still Photo, and we got this huge box, like a suitcase, just full of all the film we could possibly want to shoot. So we were pushing stuff off every day. And a lot of that stuff ended up in the Navy archives, which got pushed up the DoD archives, which got pushed into our National Archives. So a lot of my pictures, if you search on my name, are in the National Archives in high res. So I got John Leadhouse's photos up there, and a few other guys that I knew they were shooting, because it's I like sharing my photography. I know a lot of the people, if they're listening to this, that's because they love airplanes.
Absolutely,
not just the time, and they would die to do what I got to do. And I pinched myself every day, saying, I can't believe they're paying me to do this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm very jealous of your career, and certainly like some of the F-14 pictures, I've seen very iconic, and I didn't even know that they were yours until someone, mentioned it to me. So yeah, you've certainly got a good portfolio of the F-14 there and other aircraft. But moving on a bit, so what aircraft would you have liked to have flown if you didn't fly the F-14?
Overall time? Even before my time?
Anytime, yeah, anytime.
I've always been a huge fan of the P-51 Mustang. I read every story of every guy that flew them over Europe. But I would have been happy with a Corsair or a Hellcat, or I would have loved to have been one of the Flying Tigers. I read everything on the American Volunteer Group and that I could get my hands on.
So, hey, Joe, so where can we find, because you mentioned that you're an author, where can we find your books and yourself online to, view your brilliant photography?
I don't really promote them because they're all out of print now. The last one was the one I did with George Hall. That's, I think it's right back here.
Yep, we can see that. Yep.
So that was really a labor of love. I did that during the Tomcat sunset, and George Hall passed away. as we had done at Bob Lawson's house, we picked the final. We kept necking it down from 1,000 photos to 500 to just getting it necked down. And he was going back to San Francisco, and he was feeling some pain in his chest and went in to see the doctor, and they sent him to the hospital, and he didn't survive. And but all those books are out of print. So I just had somebody contact me last night. You can just type my name into Amazon, and they're on the secondary market. I know my first Tomcat book is called Fighter Country. Yeah. That was published in '92. It has a lot of my Desert Storm photography in it. And that's out there for like $32. So that's not a bad price. That's about what it was when it came out, I believe. Yeah. It was somewhere in there. So, I mean, I had a plan with George Hall to go into a series of books and something more in depth on the Tomcat. But I was relying on him as a synergistic relationship, or symbiotic. And I was so devastated by that it's been a number of years now. It's been since 2006. The new news, all the pictures you're seeing are all really fresh because I had so many outtakes where there was glare, where there was processing errors, all these things that you couldn't do anything with either slide film or print film. And a researcher came to see me a few years ago. It was 2014, and he was looking for pictures from El Dorado Canyon, and someone told him I might have some. So he came to see me. He was local, it turned out, and he saw all these other pictures, and he said, you could probably fix these. And I said, you're kidding me. I mean, there were literally thousands of pictures that I considered outtakes. He said, yeah. He says, in fact, I'll do you a favor. I'll scan them for you. I have an archival scanner, $8,000 Nikon scanner. Wow. We don't even make anymore. And he, over many months, started scanning my photos. So all these pictures you're seeing on Facebook are just now seeing the light of day. They're some older ones are the few select. There's a ratio of like a 1 to 100, I think, of the actual number of photos. He scanned about 800 pictures, and there's still more. Something broke on the scanner. So and then another guy.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Another guy saw some of the flaws in the pictures and volunteered. This guy, Pete Chilelli.
Yep, I know him.
He said, hey, I think I can fix some of those if you'll give me access to the high-res scan. So we use Dropbox, and every once in a while he'll throw one up there. And so it's a real delight for me because it's bringing back memories. Plus, I was like, wow, I don't even remember taking that one.
Yeah, I mean, I see your feed every day, and it's always a joy to see when you put up a new picture, and reworked by Peter as well. I mean, they're incredible. And
I have to give him a shout out because he's just been phenomenal. Because I've tried, I've looked at Photoshop, I'm looking on that, and it's not that I don't have the patience. I'm like an old dog. It's hard to learn that new trick.
Absolutely, yeah, I see what you mean. But so what I'll do is I'll be putting out a link to try and get your books out, the ones you mentioned on Amazon. But it's been an absolute joy to have you on, Hey Joe. I mean, likewise. Hearing your story has been incredible. You've been on my list for a while, so it's one ticked for me. And hopefully we can stay in contact and maybe get you on the show again for a live Q&A, which we've done with Bio, which you might have seen, and also Oki.
Or even Oki.
Yeah. So I know our viewers would love to see that, but I just want to say a big thank you for agreeing to do this.
I do want to say, when Oki talks about fighting other airplanes, he's not exaggerating. The guy tells it like it is. And it's the hardest thing. I've been wrapped up in an airplane with him at 6 Gs in trying to, do the M1 maneuver, to not black out. And he's got me laughing so hard, just the way he just. I mean, he's rare that he can describe the fight. He can tell you what's going to happen, what is happening, tells you what he was going to do, and it just works out just that way. I've flown with some of the great guys that they don't talk that much about it. They can do it, but they're not someone that he's very rare in that regard. That's why I'm shouting out to him, but I thank you that you got him talking so everybody could see those insights.
Absolutely brilliant. But yeah, thanks again, hey Joe, and yeah, hopefully we can see you on the show very soon, and yeah, hopefully our viewers will enjoy your story.
All right, thanks again, Mike.